Hi there everybody, and welcome to the series on Google Spreadsheets. This is the first lesson in that series. Now in this series of lessons we're going to be looking at how you can use Google Spreadsheets. I'll be referring to it as Google Sheets, but really it's the Google software package that is the same as Microsoft Excel. And basically, if you've ever worked in Microsoft Excel, or you can work in Microsoft Excel, you will find a transition to Google Sheets to be really simple. Before we get going, I just want to make one point, that spreadsheets are incredibly powerful tools to either do things like creating budgets or creating databases. They're very adept at being able to do mathematical calculations as well as to help you manage large amounts of data. But before we dive into doing the first part of lesson 1, which is to create a template budget, I just want to go through some of the basics around spreadsheets with you to make sure that we're all on the same page before we begin. Now, as normal in Google Docs, to create a new document, you use the big red Create button, and this time we're going to create a spreadsheet. Now, just like in Microsoft Excel, the spreadsheet is basically a table of rows and columns. To select a cell, you simply click on that cell. This cell here we refer to as cell C6. To select an entire column, you simply click on the column heading. To select an entire row, you simply click on the row heading. To select multiple cells at once, click and drag your selection. Now, with those fundamentals out of the way, let's start doing some really cool stuff. Now, in this lesson and the next few lessons, we're going to be building together a budget template. And really the reason why I want to build a budget template with you is to show you a couple of the formatting features of Google Sheets, as well as to show you some of the really neat mathematical calculations that Google Sheets can do. So we're going to start out by building what's called the assumptions page in our budget. This is where we're going to list all the assumptions that we're making, all the base facts on which the rest of the budget will be based. But before we move on, I just want to draw your attention to this little notice at the bottom. Now, you may find in your Google Drive that when you open a new Google Sheet, that you've got this little notice about being able to try the new Google Sheets. I really do suggest that you try the new Google Sheets because it's really infinitely better than the older version. So to do that, all you need to do is click on that button and create a new spreadsheet with the new Google Sheets. So I'm going to close that previous one, and I'm going to use this spreadsheet now, which is the new sheet, and you can tell it's got the little green check mark at the bottom, to continue with our budget. So in cell A1, I'm going to type a title, project name. So that is the name of this project. I want to format this text. I want to make it font size 12 and bold. Now notice that whatever I format is going to be that text which is inside the currently selected cell or range of cells. In the cell next to it, B1, I'm going to enter the following. Project name goes here. Remember, this is a template, so we need to give some instructions to the people using this template. And again, we're going to make that bold and font size 12. Now you'll notice something's happened here. Project name in font size 12 and bold doesn't quite fit in column A. Now there's couple of ways really of getting around this, but the simplest way is simply to make that column wider. As you move on to the dividing line between the columns, can you see that the mouse changes from a hand or an arrow to that double-headed arrow? When you see that double-headed arrow, you can click and drag to make the column wider or narrower. The other thing that you can do is when you see the double-headed arrow, if you double-click at that point, it's going to automatically make the column as wide as it needs to be for the widest piece of data in that column. So if I were to do the same thing for column B, double click, it would automatically make the column wide enough for project name goes here to fit. But I want to undo that and show you another way in which we can change and make this text fit in the column. I'm going to select all of those cells, B1 to G1, and I'm going to merge them. That means I'm going to make them into one single cell rather than separate cells. And the merge button is the one that looks like this, merge cells. Simply click on it, and you'll see that what it's done is it's made all of those cells into one large cell. Now, I'm ready to start creating a matrix within which I can store some of the basic assumptions on which the rest of this budget is based. I'm going to start in cell B3, and I'm going to enter in a couple of column headings. First one, unit type. Next one, currency. Cost per unit. Profit margin. Total cost per unit. And finally, total cost per unit in South African rands. Now you'll notice almost immediately that some of these column headings don't really fit in their columns, but we're going to fix that in a moment. For the time being, all that I want to do is select all of those cells in which I've typed text, and I want to make them bold, and I want to center them in their cells. Now some of these are starting to look very strange indeed. And I want to now show you another way in which we can get text to nicely sit within a cell, and that's called cell wrapping. So once again, I'm going to select all the content in those cells, and we're going to go and find the cell wrapping feature, which is this one, wrap text. Let me show you what that does. Can you see that that now wraps the text that doesn't fit on one line to the second line? But I think that this looks a little bit untidy still, so I'm going to select all of those, and I'm going to use the align feature to align everything in those cells to the top. So now everything is nicely aligned to the top, and things are looking neat indeed. Now the next thing I need to do is start to make provision for the kinds of resources that I'm going to use inside this budget, whether it's people or things, or maybe it's services that we need to procure from outside. So inside cell A4, I'm going to start by entering personnel. So these are all the people that I might use inside this project. A16, I'm going to make another heading of services. And in A29, scrolling down, another one, which I'm going to call materials. I'm going to select each of these and make them bold. Now, I could select one at a time, format it, go to the next one, format it. But what I can also do is I can select discrete cells by clicking on the first cell, then holding down the Control key and clicking on the next cell, holding down the Control key and clicking on the next cell. Can you see that I've now selected 3 discrete cells? And now I can do whatever formatting I want, and it's going to apply that formatting to each of those 3 cells. Now underneath this title, I'm going to start entering some other text. So personnel type 1, services type 1, and materials type 1. So now this is the place in my spreadsheet, in my budget, where I'm going to actually list the people that are going to work in the project, the services that I'm going to use for this project, and the materials that I'm going to use for this project. But I don't really want to have to type personnel 2, type personnel type 3, personnel type 4, etc. So what I'm going to do is use a feature in pretty much all spreadsheets called autofill. Select the first thing in the list that you'd like to autofill, and you'll notice that at the bottom right-hand corner, there's that big blue box. as I move my mouse over it, it changes from an arrowhead to a crosshair. Once it's a crosshair, simply click and drag and see what happens. Can you see that it's auto-filled all of that text into the cells below, and it's intelligent enough to understand that I want 1 to become 2 in the next row, to become 3 in the next row, etc., etc. Do the same thing for services, and do the same thing for materials. Now you'll notice here that I've got 11 personnel, 12 services, and 11 materials. I want to just neaten this up by deleting this row here, row 15. So all I'm going to do with that is right-click on that row header, and from the menu select Delete Row. I want to delete both of these rows. Click and drag to select both rows at the header. Right-click on that selection and delete rows 26 and 27. And finally, delete row 37 as well. Right-click, delete row. Now I'm ready to start doing a little bit more formatting on this matrix grid that I'm starting to create. The first thing I want to do is select all of the cells that make up this matrix. So that's all the way down to row 36 and dragging across to column G. And I'd like to add some borders. And the borders that I'm going to add are right borders. So from the drop-down menu, select the right border option. Can you see what that's done? It's added a right border at the right-hand side of that selection. If I had selected just those cells over there and done exactly the same thing, you'll see that it adds a right border to that selection. Let me show you that again by using this row of cells. So select from A3 to G3, and I'd like to add a border to the bottom of that selection. Now that's quite an important thing to get. No matter how big or small your selection of cells is, the border that you apply will be applied to that selection of cells as a totality. But what happens if you want to apply borders inside that selection of cells? Well, you just need to select some of the other options. Let me show you. If I were to select all of those cells and I wanted borders around everything, I would use this option here, all borders. This option here will insert inner borders. Let me show you what that looks like. So can you see that it's got inside borders on that selection, but no outside borders? Let me just undo that and show you one last time. If I were to select this one, which is just vertical borders, can you guess what it's going to do? That's right, it's going to insert vertical borders on the insides of this selection. So it's going to insert borders over there and over there. Again, let me undo that because we don't need those borders in our matrix. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working with the currency formulations inside my assumptions table. And to do that, I need to add in some new rows. Now we've seen how to delete rows. Adding in new rows is pretty much the same thing. I would like to add in some rows here below row 2. So I'm going to select row 2, right click, and I'm going to insert one row below. Let me do that again. Right click, insert one row below. Now you can do this as many times as you like, but what if you needed to insert a couple more rows than just one at a time? Well, to do that, you could select 3 rows and then do exactly the same thing. Right click, and it'll now give you the option of inserting 3 rows. As many rows as you have selected is the number of rows that you are going to be able to insert. I want to just insert one more row over here, and inside this cell I'm going to type in exchange rate. So this is now another little heading of mine, and immediately below that I want the South African Rand to US dollar exchange rate, and below that I want the South African rand to euro exchange rate. Now in this cell I can then enter in what the exchange rate at that time actually is. Let's say, for example, that it's about 10 rand to the dollar right now and about 15 rand to the dollar to the euro right now. Now I might not want that information visible on the sheet, but instead of deleting it, I can simply hide it. So all that I need to do to hide these rows is to click and drag to select all 3 rows, right click to get our right click menu, and use this option here, hide rows 3 to 5. As soon as I do that, you'll see that the rows are gone, but you'll also see that you've got this little double-headed arrow over here. Now if you click on that, it's going to unhide those rows again. Right click, hide the rows. Remember, I just need to click on that little double-headed arrow icon to unhide the rows. Now we're almost done with the work that we need to do in this lesson. The last thing we need to do is rename this worksheet. Now just before we do that, I just want to make sure that everyone is clear with the difference between a worksheet and a workbook. We currently are working on a worksheet, and you can tell that it's a worksheet by the tab over here. And as we add more worksheets to this workbook, so those tabs will appear at the bottom. So a worksheet is a single sheet within a collection of worksheets, which we also refer to as a workbook. Now to rename this worksheet, I need to access the edit menu by clicking on the down arrow over there and selecting rename. Just note here that you can also copy, change the color, you can protect the sheet. But for the moment, I just want to rename the sheet Assumptions. And I want to rename the entire workbook Budget Template. Well, that's all we have time for in this lesson. But do join me in the next lesson when we're going to continue to build up our budget template. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.